All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to break down the actual mechanics of poetic praise. We often read poetry and feel this wave of emotion, but how often do we actually stop and look at the architecture of the words? Well, today we're looking at an absolute masterclass in how a writer constructs a deep, enduring sense of reverence for their homeland. Let's dive right in.
Before we even get to our source text, I want you to think about something for a second. What specific things make a place uniquely great in the eyes of its people? If you had to prove that a culture was absolutely peerless without any equal, what evidence would you bring to the table? Would it be the mountains, the literature, the history? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go.
So we're exploring an excerpt from Subramania Bharati's Poetry, and he answers that exact question with just incredible energy. He writes, "Of hoary antiquity is Bharat, she's peerless, let's praise her." Now that phrase, hoary antiquity, it immediately establishes this massive scale of time. It tells us, right off the bat, this isn't some new, fleeting greatness. It is ancient, it's time-tested, and frankly, it's completely unmatched. Our whole goal for this explainer is to dissect exactly how the poet builds this compelling sense of national and spiritual pride. We're not just going to read the poem, we're going to pop the hood, so to speak. We want to see exactly how Bharati layers geography, history, and philosophy to create a tapestry that leaves you, the reader, totally convinced of this land's greatness. To really get how he pulls this off, we can group Bharati's praise into three core thematic pillars. First, the majestic physical landscape and texts. Second, the human and cultural legacy. And finally, the roots of spiritual wisdom. Let's start by looking at that first pillar. What's really fascinating here is how the poet grounds his ultimate praise in the physical earth first. He brings in the mighty Hemavant and the generous Ganga. Notice he doesn't start with abstract concepts, right? He starts with massive, undeniable geographical realities, and he claims them with the phrase is ours, establishing this immediate, super powerful connection between the people and the monumental landscape they live in. This setup brilliantly illustrates how Bharati pairs tangible monuments of nature with an unparalleled spiritual quality. On one side, you have literal rock and water, the Himavant and the Ganga. But on the other side, they're paired directly with concepts like having no equal on earth and possessing unmatched grace. He's literally taking geography and elevating it to the realm of the divine. It's not just a big mountain, it's a peerless entity. It's not just a river, it's a generous, graceful force. And then, he moves seamlessly from physical monuments to textual ones. He says, "The sacred Upanishads are ours. What scriptures else to name with them?" He treats these ancient philosophical texts with the exact same reverence as a towering mountain range. By doing this, he actually expands the definition of what makes up a nation's landscape to include its intellectual and spiritual heritage. You've probably noticed the specific poetic device he's using here, right? The rhetorical question. When Bharati asks what scriptures else to name with them or which other river can match her grace, he's obviously not waiting for an answer. He's actively pulling you into his logic, basically forcing your brain to agree that, yeah, there truly is no equal. It's just a highly effective technique for building consensus. Okay, let's move into our second pillar, transitioning from the landscape to the living culture, specifically looking at gallantry, sages, and music, because a land is really only as great as the people who inhabit it, and Bharati smoothly shifts his praise from static mountains to the dynamic pulse of human history. The poem populates this space with some fascinatingly contrasting figures. Gallant warriors have lived here, many a sage has sanctified this land. Talk about a contrast. On one hand, you have the fierce, active, protective energy of gallant warriors. On the other, the calm, spiritual, purifying presence of sages. He's telling us that this land produces the absolute pinnacle of human potential in both action and contemplation. So, the crucial takeaway here is that human achievement becomes a core reason for the land's greatness. Look at the cultural canvas he paints. We've got warriors and sages, sure, but we also have the divinest music being heard, and the presence of all auspicious things. The poem expands to include art, sound, and this general aura of blessedness. It is a fully realized, multi-sensory depiction of a thriving culture. And just like he did with the geography earlier, the poet relies heavily on duality here. Think about it. Tangible, physical greatness, like the warriors shaping history, versus the ethereal, intangible greatness, like sages sanctifying the ground, or divine music filling the air.
By weaving these two sides together, Bharati ensures his praise covers absolutely every aspect of existence, both seen and unseen.
Which brings us to our third and final pillar. Here, the poem anchors its ultimate praise in specific, monumental philosophical milestones. Here, Brahma knowledge has taken root, and the Buddha preached his Dharma here. He's pointing to actual events and concepts that have shaped not just this land, but global spiritual thought. He states, as a matter of fact, that this specific geography is the literal birthplace of profound enlightenment. If you map this out, notice the progression of spiritual history across the text. It's not just a random list, it's a living timeline. First, the sacred Upanishads provide the ancient foundational texts. Second, that Brahma knowledge doesn't just sit in a dusty book. It actually takes root in the culture. And finally, it culminates in figures like the Buddha, actively preaching Dharma to the masses. He's showing a vibrant, evolving tradition of wisdom that breathes in the very soil. So after stacking up all this evidence, the mountains, the rivers, the scriptures, the warriors, the sages, the Buddha, the poet uses this super enthusiastic refrain to tie the whole thing together. "This sunny golden land is ours. She's peerless. Let's praise her." That phrase, sunny golden land, contrasts so beautifully with the hoary antiquity he mentioned earlier. It implies that, despite being ancient, the culture is still bright, warm, precious like gold, and utterly alive today. Stepping back, we can clearly see the underlying mechanics of how Bharati constructed this persuasive image. He uses the constant repetition of ownership, saying "is ours," to foster pride. He uses those rhetorical questions to force agreement. He masterfully connects ancient history with present-day vibrancy. And finally, he doesn't just describe the land, he hits us with a direct call to action: let's praise her. It is quite literally a meticulously crafted engine of appreciation. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought inspired by this incredibly passionate poetry. Bharati found peerless beauty in his land's rivers, scriptures, and history. If you were to apply this exact same architecture of praise to your own surroundings, what specific geographical, human, or cultural elements would you write into your own poem of appreciation? What makes your world uniquely yours? It's a pretty powerful exercise in seeing the greatness right in front of us. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the mechanics of poetry, and keep looking for the structure behind the words.